So we have some updates for Nvidia stock that I absolutely want to go ahead and touch on, as in my previous video I mentioned how we have a lot of influential data points that are going to be shaping the directional move for Nvidia stock, and I absolutely want to go ahead and touch on what those updates were and what we have to be mindful of moving forward. Now, of course, we talked a lot in the previous video, and I'm not going to recap everything I said in the previous video, as that would make this video much longer than it needs to be. But of course, we identified the obvious on how Nvidia stock is experiencing a lot of selling pressure, and we identified how that began on the 11th of July after the consumer price index. And then we delved into, a macroeconomic perspective on why that inflationary report caused Nvidia stock to sell off. Now, I'm not going to mention, the entire reason behind it, because it would make the video much longer again than it needs to be. But the short answer is just market breadth expansion. And if you don't know what that means, then check out the last video and you'll be up to speed. But what are the updates that we got for today? Well, we had some fundamental updates and a bit of some macroeconomic updates as well. Of course, the week is not over, and we still have an influx of multiple data points coming out, some other earnings coming out that we're going to want to be mindful of, and of course some other huge data points from a macro perspective. Now, what were the updates that we got today? Well, we see that Nvidia stock is pushing up at the time of this recording after the earnings, or pretty much after hours. Nvidia didn't have earnings, let me correct myself, but we had earnings from two other companies that I highlighted we wanted to be mindful of because that was going to influence Nvidia, and those two companies were Microsoft and AMD. And the reason why I said we want to be mindful of Microsoft and AMD for this week is because that kind of gives us an insight on Nvidia being, we're trying to look through the lens of what's going on with AI, because again, the concern with a lot of market participants is that perhaps the investment in AI won't pay off. And so we'll go ahead and delve in by taking a look into my Microsoft OneNote, which is actually pretty ironic because we're using Microsoft OneNote to talk about Microsoft. But hey, it is what it is. So let's go ahead and touch on things. So we're looking at the income statement, and some companies call it statement of operations, income statements. It's basically the same thing. But here are my notes. Right now, I'm not going to read the entirety of my notes here. I just take notes after their earnings come out. And one thing that we saw, and these are some of the things I highlighted, is that, of course, revenue growth. We saw that from a year-over-year perspective. That's great. And one of the main drivers for the growth was service and other revenue in the segments, and so that was good. And we also saw that research and development expenses increased, and so that kind of suggests that there's still investment in innovation, and so that could be good news for Nvidia. Then, of course, I have here on the right just plotted the earnings per share. Both were looking from a year-over-year perspective, so from 2023 to 2024, basic EPS increased by 22%. If we're looking quarter over quarter, it increased 9%. So everything's looking good for Microsoft, but there was a little bit of a disappointment. And in my opinion, it's not too big of a disappointment, but of course this is something that the market is scrutinizing. So Microsoft said its revenue from its intelligent cloud unit, home to the Azure cloud computing program, rose 19% to $28.5 billion in the fiscal fourth quarter ended July 30th. However, it missed analyst estimates of $28.68 billion. Oh, come on, guys, look at this. Everything looked great for Microsoft, but we came slightly below, the expectations that analysts had for one particular segment, which is, of course, just a look into the AI perspective in Microsoft. Of course, Microsoft has some other, segments within its AI kind of what it's doing with AI, but this alone kind of raises the eyebrow. Well, it came slightly under what the analysts expected, although it's not by much. But it is something that we want to be mindful of. But, of course, one other piece of data that we got today was actually the earnings for AMD. And this actually provides kind of a better outlook, as we have here the consolidated statement of operations. Like I said, some companies call it income statement. Some companies call it statement of operations. It's the same thing, basically, right? And I highlighted some of my notes. And here's the good news. So AMD reported a net revenue of $5.835 billion, which is an increase from its $5.359 billion in the same period year over year. So that's good news. And then interestingly enough, their R&D rose as well, reflecting increased investment in product development. And so, again, good news. That's good stuff right over here. Now, of course, we have the earnings per share that I plotted, and the trend is still good. But here's something else I wanted to highlight, and this kind of gives us the outlook. And this is why when we toggle over, let's toggle over to AMD. AMD is pushing up in the after hours, right? Its earnings were pretty good, and it's kind of helping push the story of Nvidia, but not as much. Of course, we had a little bit of a mixed reaction with Microsoft with the Azure, but nonetheless, let's talk about AMD, right? So this is the part I want to go ahead and highlight. So this is quoted: "Our AI business continued accelerating." Or did I say that right? AI business continued accelerating, and we are well positioned to deliver strong revenue growth in the second half of the year, led by demand for Instinct. And they talk about how the Ryzen processors, etc., are doing well. And it says that the rapid advancements in generative AI are driving demand for more compute in every market. And so this is good news, right? Because this is kind of more in line with the space that Nvidia is. Of course, Nvidia, again, it has a lot of segments that are similar to AMD, although it focuses a little bit more on its GPUs than its CPUs. But of course, there's a lot, right? The data centers, the gaming segments. But nonetheless, this kind of gives us just a picture of what we may see for the earnings for Nvidia. That yes, AI is still growing, and companies are still investing in AI. Therefore, one of the main beneficiaries is Nvidia, and so that's kind of good news. Now, again, we don't have the actual earnings for Nvidia just yet. Their earnings come kind of towards the later end of earnings season. So unfortunately, we don't have that data right now, because that would obviously help really tell us what's going on with the story of Nvidia from a fundamental perspective. But if you're trying to analyze what's going on with Nvidia, sometimes you have to look at some of the comparable companies like AMD and what's going on in AI in general, like taking a look at what's going on with Microsoft. Are they still investing in AI? Well, how are the AI products doing? And of course, we still have a few other companies. We have Meta and a few others. But nonetheless, the week is not over. We have some other data points from a fundamental perspective. But let's also touch on things from let's actually touch on things from a macro perspective. And of course, if you go on federalreserve.gov, what we know is that, hey, we're going to have the Federal Reserve, the FOMC, have their meeting, and we're going to get an update on monetary policy and what their future outlooks are looking. Now, if we actually toggle over here, the future markets are expecting that the Federal Reserve is going to maintain the federal funds rate at the same level. They're expecting that there's a 95.90% chance that they won't hike or cut. But that's fine. That's not what everyone's worried about. What we're looking for is the tonality and the verbiage of what they're going to say, because that will give us an insight for the next meeting, which is in September, which right now the future markets are predicting that it's going to have an 86.8% chance that there's going to be a 25 basis points cut. And that we talked about was going to be more favorable for smaller cap companies, since they thrive well or perform well in a lower interest rate environment. And that's kind of causing some of the selling pressure for Nvidia that we talked about in the last video, how we're seeing capital flow out of the Nvidia and now flowing into the broader markets as again, people are kind of expecting that the Feds are going to cut. We also got some other macro data. We had the JOLTS report. We're looking at one of the economists from Wells Fargo, what they said, and all their beautiful charts here. But pretty much the JOLTS report came out, which is kind of like an insight to the labor markets. And what we're seeing is that we're still seeing a little bit of weakness in the labor market, although it's not like something that's horrible, right? We're not seeing crazy layoffs. Layoffs are kind of, remaining in a kind of consolidative state, but we are seeing quit rates, go down, and hiring rates go down. So there's still that contraction in the labor markets, and so that kind of tells you that we're more in an employer market where they kind of have the favorite, they pick and choose the best. It's not like what we had before, where we were kind of in the employee market where it was more favorable. But again, this kind of gives us an insight, and you could read this from Wells Fargo, what their economists say. But this is like an insight that, again, we are still seeing some contraction in the labor markets. Although it's not weak, like it's not horrible. It's not like there's a lot of calamity taking place, but nonetheless, it is a bit of a contraction, and that kind of signals that we're likely to get those rate cuts. But of course, The main issue is the fundamental updates, and we are seeing that Nvidia stock in the after hours is pushing up after the earnings of AMD and after the earnings of Microsoft. And of course, although like I said, they're not related to Nvidia, we have to kind of, as if you're analyzing a particular security, you have to understand what its constituents are doing, right? And I know sometimes when I kind of do my analysis like this, people are saying, oh, why are you talking about this company and this company when the video is about this company? And it's like, look, you have to understand what's going on because it gives us clues, right? We don't have the concrete data of the fundamentals for Nvidia just yet because we have to wait for their earnings, which is coming soon, but it's towards the later end of the earnings season. But this kind of gives us a picture, like a little snapshot of what's going on. So of course we'll go ahead and provide an update after we get the monetary policy updates for tomorrow and what we hear from Jerome Powell, or Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. I mentioned his name so much I just mentioned it casually, but it's Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. But with that said, hopefully you guys enjoyed some of the value in this video. If you liked it, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future videos. And also check out this video right over here where I talk about line charts, or check out this video over here where I talk about the best days to participate in the market. And with that said, I'll see you guys on either of those two videos. Take care, guys.